Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Mount Vernon SSPA Task Force, Tuesday, July 20th, 2021. For those that may be joining this call for the first time, I'm Planning Commissioner Walter Clark, and joined by Planning Commissioner Mr. Tim Sargent, and we're your co-chairmen for this task force. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members are participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in the meeting to state your name and location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. Ms. Catherine Ward.
I'm here at my house on Gladstone.
Lynn Pasco.
I'm here from my residence at Montebello.
Gretchen Walsh. Gretchen Walsall. Queenie Cox.
I'm here in Gum Springs at my home.
Evan Kaufman.
This is Evan calling in from Richmond, Virginia.
Ellen Young.
I'm here at NW.
Holly Doherty. Hillary Clausen. Mary Payton. All right, and if they join later, we would catch up. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to so that I may be heard to make the requisite motions. I move that each member's, I'm sorry, let me back up. I forgot to call the co-chairman. Mr. Tim Sargent.
Here
And where you calling?
from the Mount Vernon Supervisor's Office.
And Walter Clark in the Mount Vernon Supervisor's Office. Sorry about that, folks. Now, I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force.
Do I hear a second?
This is Ellen, I'll second.
Seconded by Ellen. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels this emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to the meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through the dedicated video and audio conference line, and that the public may access the meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of the SSPA website at fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-development/plan-amendments SSPA/South/track-plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956 TTY 711 and entering the access code. It is so moved.
Do I hear a second to the motion? Anyone?
Second,
Was that
Second.
Queenie?
yes.
Okay. The motion has been seconded.
Sorry.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed of today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in the Fairfax County government, and or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operating, and the discharge of the Mount Vernon District's SSPA Task Force's lawful process, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Was that Catherine?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before we move into the agenda, I'd like to ask staff if there's any open public hearing comments or notes that we've received since the last meeting.
No, there aren't.
Okay, thank you. So as we move into tonight's agenda, and before we get into our presentations, I'd like to call on staff if Mr. Owen and Mr. Clyburner have a few announcements for the task force.
One announcement, the virtual meetings that we've been doing for over a year at this point, we're going to be shifting to what we're not calling hybrid, but what we're calling in-person meetings with a virtual component. And I mentioned that is that we're going to have our August recess of the task force along with all other commissions, or at least most of them. And we'll be picking back up with the SSPA task force in September. I think specifically we have a meeting scheduled for September the 6th. So I just wanted to get everybody's, make sure everybody's kind of aware of that the next meeting will be in person. We've begun looking at specific locations where we can meet in conjunction with the Mount Vernon Supervisor District's office. So we'll have some more details in terms of where that physical location will be, but it will be in a place in the Mount Vernon District, obviously, hopefully relatively close to the site. And just wanted to mention that with the new requirements, once the state of emergency either expires or September happens, we will be in a position of needing a physical quorum to assemble. So that means that at least the majority of the people that are on the task force will need to come in to this physical location, and then there will be some specific parameters in which people can continue to participate virtually. So I just want to make sure that people are aware of that. We'll provide some additional information soon regarding kind of the procedures and the locations and everything like that. But working on it, and the technology that we have, we're testing out now and seems to be working just fine. So I just wanted to put a plug in for everybody just to let you know that will be kind of the next step once we resume in September.
Question?
Yeah, I have a question. Why is it that we're allowing some people to do it virtually and others not? I understand the quorum thing, but this could turn into the same person never being here.
So there's some specific rules and rationales for allowing virtual participation. And I'll send a link around once we have it that contains them, but it's specific things with regards to health and specific situations for particular family members of the family and sickness and health and that sort of thing. So more to come, Catherine, but the goal is to get people back in person meeting again. That's it.
And I'm assuming the two locations you're looking at are going to be the Highland Center and Mount Vernon Government Center, and you're not going to go groping around for other stuff.
The two that we've been looking at are the Government Center, and then the other one is Martha Washington Library in particular.
Okay, well, you know, the library closes at, I think, 9:30. They throw you out. So
Right.
that's helpful. We'll work faster. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Hopefully, if we keep a 6:30 time frame, 9:30, we'll probably be ready to wrap things up by then anyway. So.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. It's a lot of fun here. Come on. Hey, question, Owen, if I could. Graham, excuse me, Graham. What time will the meetings in person start? Do you anticipate?
We could keep going with 6:30 if that works for the task force, but if there is interest in switching it up, with the specific locations, as Catherine mentioned, there are specific cutoff times. So we need to take that in consideration. But if there's interest in bumping it up to 7 o'clock or bumping it back to 6 o'clock, the task force can propose that, and that's fine. So we'll work with the facilities to make sure that we have availability for the rooms. But if there's interest in changing it from the current 6:30 time, we can talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any further questions regarding that matter? If not, we'd like to move on to our first presentation tonight with the Huntington Metro Station, PA 2021-00005, and we'll turn that over to our presenters.
All right, and I'll just, as a quick note of introduction, so y'all know me from previous meetings, but I just wanted to mention that we have a large contingent from the Fairfax County Department of Transportation here that's going to help with this presentation, as well as members of the team from Stout and Teague and Kimberly Horn, who had originally proposed the nomination and have been working on the transportation analysis. So there's a large group of people that are helping put this together and are working on the transportation study that you're going to hear from tonight. And so with that, I just wanted to go briefly through the agenda, what we're going to be covering, because there is going to be quite a bit in terms of material to cover. But the first thing that we'll be looking at is what we call existing conditions. So what is the existing conditions on the ground from a transportation standpoint? This from the existing conditions as they relate to the site today, but also current policy. So looking at the existing comprehensive plan and the existing studies that are taking place in the area. Next, we'll be looking at all modes. So looking at transit operations, obviously, given that we're at a WMATA station, BRT, bicycle and pedestrian, as well as vehicles. And then we're also going to have a discussion on the transportation impact analysis, which is this larger study of which is going to be comparing the current plan for the site to the proposed plan, which is what the authorization is requesting us to study. And then we'll bring it back to the task force at a couple of intervals for questions, because there's going to be a lot of material to cover. But with that, I should probably introduce Bob Pecora and Tim Cutts, who are kind of my counterparts over at FCDOT, who have been working with me in particular on this study from the transportation end of things. So Tim and Bob, if you want to introduce yourselves, feel free, and feel free to introduce the rest of your team. So take it away.
Great, thanks, Grant. Yeah, since there's a lot of us on the call tonight, I'll move to the introduction. So I'm Tim Cutts. I'm working with Bob Pecora on this plan amendment. We're in the long-range planning section for Fairfax County DOT, and with me from that section today is Tom Burke and Zach Cromwell as well. Then we have Vanessa Aguirre, who's leading the BRT effort, as I'm sure you all know, and she's going to be giving a presentation following the discussion on the existing conditions of TIA. Also on the call, we have David Klein. He's with our transportation modeling group. And we have Mark Dreyfus and Jeremy Coe from our site analysis sections. So I'm going to find my presentation. And we'll get started. Okay, so a brief run through of what I'll be talking about tonight. And again, as Graham said, I'll stop at intervals to see if you'll have any questions. There's a lot of material to cover tonight. I am going to move through it fairly quickly, but again, if you have any questions, please stop me and certainly raise those. We have a lot of people here that can answer those for you. So I'll be talking about the existing conditions, what it looks like today on the ground, as well as what's already in the comprehensive plan, looking at the bicycle master plan, as Graham mentioned, looking at multimodal aspects of this site, the trails plan, transit and vehicular improvements that are in the comprehensive plan currently. We have a lot of projects nearby. This is a very busy area with a lot going on, so I'll touch on that briefly and talk about some of those and get into finally the traffic impact analysis, what the process for that is, talk a little bit about the study scope of work. David Samba from Kimley Horn, the traffic consultant, is on the line as well, so I'll have him say a few words and some remarks on that effort. And then we'll finish up, at least with this section, sort of talking about the path forward with the transportation analysis timeline. So looking at access and amenities around the site, you can see for pedestrian access to the site, there are several signalized crossings. Over Huntington Avenue, you have one at Metroview Parkway and at Metro Access Drive. And then going down over to North King Street, you have a signalized crossing at Jefferson Drive, sort of by that blue arrow, if you can see my cursor, and then down at Huntington Park Drive. There's also an unsignalized high visibility crosswalk down here at Farmington Drive. So fairly good pedestrian connectivity across those major roadways. As far as bicycles are concerned, however, while there's ample parking, 32 bike racks and 12 lockers located at the metro station, there's no bike share. The closest bike share is actually across the way in Alexandria at the Eisenhower Avenue station. And then there's no dedicated bicycle facilities adjacent to the site. So no bike lanes, no shared use paths leading to the metro station. So that's definitely something that we want to consider in making recommendations for the site, is how to better connect bicyclists as well as pedestrians. Of course, transit is a big component of this. You have bus access from both North Kings Highway and Huntington Avenue. You can see all the access points for transit and vehicular access points at the arrows here. So talking a little bit about existing transit service, obviously the big one is the Metro Rail station. This is the end of the yellow line. You also have, right here is the North Kiss and Ride, where you have Metro Bus and Rex, Fairfax Connector service. So from Rex, you have access to Fort Belvoir, the King Street Metro Bus. You have Route 10A, which will take you through Alexandria up to the Pentagon. And then the north side connector routes, you have access to Mount Vernon, Van Dorn, Franconia, Springfield, metro stations, the Lorton VRT, the Rolling Valley, Park and Ride. And then on the south side, these connector routes can take you to Mount Vernon State, Mount Vernon Hospital, various loops there, as well as the Woodlawn Shopping Center. So now we're going to talk about some of the current plans as far as bicycles and pedestrians are concerned. This is a look at the bicycle master plan. So you can see there's a bike lane currently planned for Huntington Avenue, and then nothing planned along North Kings Highway. So there may be opportunity. Obviously, with the grade, it's a bit difficult to sort of plan a route there, but taking a look at that versus the county-wide plan, you see a little more fleshed out picture. You have a minor paved trail along Huntington Avenue, a minor paved trail along North Kings Highway, and then you can see the shared use path, the major paved trail that would be built along Cameron Run. One thing I'll note about these plans, and I'll go into on the next slide, there's a few discrepancies between them, as you probably noticed. These are older plans. The guidance within them is not up to current standards. So we do have a countywide effort called the Active Fairfax Transportation Plan, which is really looking to sort of synchronize both of those plans, bring them up to current standards, make sure that we have recommendations that make sense. Obviously, you're not going to fit a bike lane and shared use path along Huntington Avenue given constraints. So generally what we've been doing is having the trails plan take precedence. But again, this will all be looked at with this Active Fairfax Transportation Plan. Just a couple brief notes. They're currently, actually they just wrapped up some outreach for phase 1 over the spring, where they went out and met with various districts and got some input on their plan. They have actually a really interesting website where you can go and make note of, on this interactive map, it's kind of a crowdsourced map. You can make note of various destinations or barriers to access, anything that you might think needs improved in your neighborhood or certainly around this area. Make note of that. There's already a lot of good feedback on that website, which you can find at the link below. And that's phase 1, is really sort of doing that initial outreach, seeking public feedback on the vision, goals, and objectives, and then eventually there would be board action later this year, sometime in the fall, on the adoption of those vision, goals, and objectives. And then an endorsement of this Safe Streets for All program plan before phase 2 takes place. So phase 2, it's not yet funded, but that would include the development of the active transportation recommendations, a facility selection toolkit, additional coordination with potential updates to the comprehensive plan, and then sort of a guide to implementation of the policy program and prioritization of the various projects that would be within this plan. And this is a look at what's currently in the plan for transportation. So obviously you have the BRT line extending down North Kings and connecting to Richmond Highway from the Metro Rail station, as well as the eventual extension of the Yellow Line, a much longer term project. And then I did want to note that since the 80s, there had been a recommendation to have an interchange here at Huntington Avenue and Richmond Highway. That was recently removed with the North Gateway Plan Amendment, which was just adopted in December of 2020. And there are no plans to widen the roadways surrounding the site, North Kings Highway, Huntington Avenue, Richmond Highway, just adjacent. So Graham talked about some of the projects that are going on around the site a couple meetings ago, and this is just kind of a bird's eye view of what that looks like. We're looking sort of eastbound here. Obviously, most of you are familiar with some of these. I did want to mention that obviously with all this development going on, with all this activity, I did see the recording of the meeting last week, and I was encouraged to hear that there's very big focus on pedestrian connectivity, bicycle connectivity. That's going to be important with this transit-oriented development. And I wanted to mention that we did secure, FCDOT did secure a grant recently to do a Huntington active transportation study. That would be kicking off in the fall of this year, likely in September. This month and the next month, we're looking to acquire a consultant for that study. And basically that's going to look at existing conditions around the TSA and looking for maybe some short-term improvements along with some of the long-term improvements that have already been envisioned to see what works best for pedestrians and cyclists in the area. So more to come on that, but just wanted to throw that out there that we do want to take a serious look at pedestrian and bicycle connectivity in this area, and not just the TIA, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, looking at the vehicular perspective. Any questions so far before I get into talking about the transportation impact analysis? Not, then I'll continue. So this is sort of a brief overview of what transportation impact analysis is, TIA. This is a VDOT process for the analysis of transportation impacts proposed by a new development. So change in land use. This is done with comp plans and rezonings. And the whole purpose of this is to see whether there are impacts that need to be mitigated and kind of balance the land use with access and make sure that transportation is still efficient through and around the site. So we met with WMATA and the applicants back in May and get into this in a couple of slides, agreed on the scoping document for that study that was signed off in June. And so the consultant is well on their way to working up that analysis and that report. And I'll talk a little bit more about the timeline for that later. But this is basically what is the purpose again of the TIA. We're proposing a land use change here via the comp plan amendment. So we're assessing how that affects the road network. In order to do that, we typically do traffic counts. However, since we're in a pandemic, we're kind of the tail end of a pandemic, what we've done in this case is use historical traffic count data. Luckily, we have some recent studies, as I mentioned, North Gateway, just wrapping up. We have the Richmond Highway BRT traffic study from 2017. So we're taking some of that historical traffic count data, growing those traffic volumes, and using this baseline condition, 2019 existing condition number, and then sort of forecasting from there into 2045 to see what traffic might look like given all these different changes in land use in this area. So we're simulating how traffic is going to change over time, how it might affect or impact the road network, and then, as I said, looking at mitigations, whether that be adjustments to signal timing, looking at different intersection lane configurations, things of that nature. This is a look at the study area. It's quite extensive. I will say studying 24 intersections is more than we typically do, but I think it's going to be a great comprehensive look at the area, how we affect traffic as far down as Richmond Highway and PennDOT, and looking at a range of different intersections here. I think what I'd like is if David Samba is on the line, if you can maybe speak about what your team's going to be looking at as far as the TIA, some of the things we're looking to measure as far as intersection delay, turning movements, and kind of talk to your process.
Sure. And sorry, my name is David Samba. I'm with Kinley Horn and the traffic consultant on behalf of the applicant. And Tim, thank you for that introduction in terms of the transitions impact analysis that we're going to be conducting. Just to give you a little bit more details, so at the 24 study area intersections, we're going to be performing analyses for existing conditions, the conditions with the current comp plan, and the conditions with the proposed comp plan amendment. And when we say conditions, again, from an analysis standpoint, it's primarily focused on vehicular operations. So at intersections, we're going to be looking at how much additional delay or reduced delay is going to be created by the additional density of the comp plan. We will also look at where specific movements, turn lanes are over capacity. That is, if they have, whether they'll be showing more volume that can be handled in a given cycle. We'll be identifying those. We'll be looking at queuing. So again, spillback between intersections and just general congestion, the metric for that. And we're looking at this again at these 24 intersections, but also on the roadway links that connect the intersections. What we'll be doing essentially is identifying at what point or what points within this network are over capacity or reaching failure conditions, and then identifying potential solutions that could be implemented in the future to accommodate that. And I guess one way to contextualize this is because our analysis is in 2045, this particular study is not identifying a timeline for those improvements. This is to suggest that by 2045, we would need those improvements in place. The specific timing of those improvements would come at, or would be determined in a rezoning TIA that would be implemented later with the specific land uses of the site to be developed.
Can I ask a question now, or do we want to wait?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, a couple of questions and points based on what you just spoke about in your scoping process. There are new processes for considering LOS. Virginia Department of Transportation seems to be stuck using LOS to decide on queuing and things of that sort. The industry is looking at other methods. Are you aware of them? And if so, how do you plan on implementing them? That's the first question. The second question is, what I've heard you say is by 2045, you intend to be looking at things based on the added density from an auto perspective. The world is changing, gentlemen. We're getting out of our cars. We're living in higher rises near metros. So I'm confused and concerned that traffic engineers consistently look at things in the future as though we're all going to be one driver in one automobile. So could you please address my concerns? Thank you.
Sure. Tim, should I take that, or do you have a?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so this study does follow the VDOT process, and that's why we're showing the 24 study area intersections for vehicular operations. As Tim mentioned, we will be at the existing conditions looking at and documenting the both the quality and the quantity of the active transportation facilities. So that's your pedestrian, your bicycle, and your transit. As Tim indicated, there will be the future BRT, and so that is taken into consideration in terms of the mode split that's going to create. Again, with the BRT, there'll be less people that need to drive to the Huntington area. They'll be able to have access via high capacity transit. So that is layered into our assumptions about how much additional traffic will be generated to the area in general. With respect to other.
Okay, I'm going to make an obnoxious comment at this juncture. Right now, VDOT and FCDOT have a plan to widen Richmond Highway for 2045 to create, in some instances, 12 and 13 lanes of traffic. That seems to be an anathema to what I'm hearing, that you're going to be looking at alternative transportation modes.
I was going to follow that up with just another question. I want to know your estimate in 2045. How much traffic is going to go down because we're spending $1 billion project on Route 1? I mean, that you have all of this federal money coming in to lower traffic. So what are your numbers that you're looking at for 2045? This is really a lot more than an academic subject for us, because it's the whole question of whether or not we can use Route 1, whether or not we can use Huntington Avenue as real streets rather than just thoroughfares.
Everyone, this is Bob Pecora, FCDOT. Let me answer a couple of questions here then. On the, Catherine, what you had mentioned about the alternate measures of analysis or effectiveness, or everything like not LOS or something like that, that's still something that is being discussed, but we are still looking at levels of service until FCDOT or VDOT changes the policy. We still have to follow established policy regarding levels of service. This is the initial start of the analysis. So to Lynn Pascoe's comments about the how much volume is going to be on attributed to the proposed land uses at Huntington Metro. That is part of the analysis that we have just started, so we don't have anything to talk about yet as to what the volumes will be for 2045 and such. So this part of the analysis, like we were just describing, it just started about a few weeks ago. with the scoping process. So the methodology that we discussed with VDOT and FCDOT staff was just agreed upon in last couple of weeks. And this is the part that, we're just introducing this. This is things that we will look at. So your comments about, what will it look like in 2045? We don't know yet because we don't have the analysis yet, but that's coming up in the presentations in the next couple of months. So.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I appreciate that, but again, I'm not going to waste a lot of time with folks who want to just listen to what you have to say, but I think you have an educated group here.
Yeah.
And frankly, telling us that, oh, that's the current policy just flies in the face of good common sense. Vehicle miles traveled are being used by cities all over this country. We are in the dark ages, and I believe folks like yourself should be advising back. This group should be advising back. The TAC should be advising back to VDOT and FCDOT to look to the future. But I won't bitch anymore. I just wanted to make my point.
I have a question.
But I'd like to just add one other thing, and that is that where you start is where you end up. We all know that on studies. So if you start out with the assumption that there's going to be a huge amount of traffic in the future in 2045, then we know what you're going to end up with there. You're going to end up with more lanes and ways to get them faster down the street. So I think the methodology is really critical here. And before you start another study that ends up coming up with 13 lanes, for gosh sakes, we need to somehow change this process. Sorry, maybe that was a bitch.
Well, I'd like to know, what is the level of service currently on the roadways for the targeted area?
So that'll be fleshed out in the transportation analysis. So we'll have that.
I'm talking about but you should know what the LOS is now. So what is it now?
Study hasn't started yet.
Yeah, that the study is going to start and set the baseline, the existing conditions, as I said, using some of the historical counts that were done, and it'll set that baseline level of service, and that's when we'll can report on that.
Yeah, but guys, I agree with Queenie, using a historical count when everybody used to jump in their car and drive. Now that we have the pandemic, more companies that are downtown and other places are working from home. Their folks aren't going into the office. So if you look at backwards at historical count, as Lynn says, you're starting from the wrong point.
Yeah, well, let me explain a little bit more about how we're looking at the historical count. We have traffic data from when other studies in the area were taken, so actual traffic counts, and we are growing those with a percentage growth factor to the pre-pandemic number. So we're using 2019 as our base year. So models or analysis that we have from like North Gateway that took place in 2017, 2018, we have to extrapolate that to a 2019 number based on sound methodology that we've established in the area. So we're bringing up all the traffic counts since we can't go out there and do an actual traffic count now, because the traffic is not up to what it was pre-pandemic. We have to artificially grow the numbers to a 2019
Bob, listen
level.
to yourself. You're using the word grow. Everything is, hi, Tom, love the beard. You're grow. That's what is the grow? How about reduce? That's the whole intent of the comp plan and the vision. It's to make these areas urban and to get people out of their cars, get them on their bikes, get them on their feet. And you guys just are going backwards. I'm sorry, I'm bitching.
We don't know yet.
I think I was going to mention that, and I think you'll see this in some future meetings as we present a little bit further into the study. As part of the scoping process, we did talk a lot about, again, what is the multimodal nature of the site? What is it being transit oriented? What will that do for the specific trip generation in the area, plus the VRT? We're assuming a very generous 45% mode split for this site. That coupled with, again, we are starting from 2019, but we're using a very strategic growth plan for that traffic. I think we're addressing the multimodal elements, and you'll see that documented throughout the process.
Thank you.
This is Tim Sargent. Can I ask a question? would your analysis include, as you go forward, not only mode trends, but also population trends? I mean, would EDA provide that kind of data that says, here's what we anticipate in terms of business development, growth development in the area that would help inform your transportation modeling?
Yes, so and I suspect David Klein could say a little bit more about this as well. But that third bullet on the slide, the growth projections per the regional model, that regional model is informed by employment, land uses, and household that the county has both modeled and projected into the future. So when we are trying to come up with what the 2045 traffic levels and patterns are, that is tied to like, what is currently in the comp plan and also some additional, I guess, more recent edits to that as well.
When it's, if I could ask one other question, when you look at those population and growth projections and those models, can it also factor in what you anticipate to be transportation trends? And by that, I mean, not only BRT and its long-term impact, but also more regional and local shuttles, for example, and that may dissipate some of that traffic. I mean, when we looked at the planning vision for Tyson's, we looked at things, you know, the grid of streets plus based on some shuttles that might help, you know, dissipate traffic over time. So is that feasible to have that kind of knowledgeable input for future traffic and transportation planning?
So we have demographers that forecast land use for the Council of Governments for Fairfax County. That's square footages by employment types. Neighborhood Community Services develops population forecasts. We then feed that into the model as population and jobs. And then the model takes into account mode split. It takes into account a lot of other factors. And then even beyond that, we have TDM, Transportation Demand Management Assumptions. Like David mentioned, the 45% assumption, we're assuming that almost half of the trips are going to be using alternative modes other than single occupancy vehicles. So there's a process to it. And yes, the land use is developed, it's fed into the model, we forecast traffic, and then we even adjust beyond that based on proximity to transit, land use density, and all those other things, internal synergy.
It may be very helpful along the way to have those discussions brought out, as they certainly feed into your ultimate projections, but to have those discussions of how those factor in may be helpful and useful and informative, especially alternative modes for travel and shuttles and things like that, for us to better understand how it fits into your projections. Just a thought.
All right, Tim.
Okay. Yep. And before we move on, Catherine, you mentioned some of the alternative modes of studying, you know, bicycles and pedestrians as opposed to just vehicular analysis, and that is actually something that, you know, we have been looking at in consultation with VDOT as well. You know, with the grant I mentioned, looking at the Huntington TSA as a whole, that is something that's only focused on active transportation. So we do have, you know, a way to get sort of creative with that project, I think, and look at some of these other different metrics like bicycle level of traffic stress, pedestrian comfort. And so I think that's going to be a real good opportunity to do those sorts of things. And again, like you said, not just focus on the vehicular aspect.
Tim, I greatly appreciate that. However, when I hear briefers and consultants use the words, figure out the higher, you know, more density and how many car trips that's going to create, as Lynn says, you guys are now focused on the automobile. And there's other methods. I appreciate you guys are thinking about it. I know FCDOT has put together a task force. The task forces take forever to get anything done. And as Commissioner Sargent has said, you guys already have the tools. You know how to do this. You know how to do it right. So please don't lock yourself into the demands of VDOT and FCDOT leadership when in fact you're going to come up with the wrong answer when you do it that way, because we're the ones who have to live with it. So again, I'm going to try not to say any more.
So this is actually the last slide I have here. This is just a tentative timeline for the transportation analysis. As I mentioned, the scope of work was signed in June. We are here in July, and again, the first draft of that analysis is expected to be completed in early September. At that point, FCDOT will take a look at that. We'll look at the mitigations being proposed, and then work with WMATA and the traffic consultant to finalize that document and submit to VDOT. VDOT then has a 90-day review. We found that typically it takes them about 45 to 60 days to do their initial review. And in between that time, we'll continue to discuss with you all, as I said, the bicycle and pedestrian plan, other aspects of transportation, through November and January, when we expect to receive VDOT's comments. Generally, VDOT will have comments that need to be addressed, and there'll be a second round of review. And typically it'll take another 30 days to get back to us on that. So be looking to wrap up at least the transportation analysis portion in February 2022. And so if there are any more questions, be happy to answer those now. And then Vanessa will be doing her presentation on VRT next. So if not, Vanessa, if you want to take it away.
Thanks, Tim. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So hello again, I'm Vanessa Guo with the county. I am actually in the Capital Projects and Traffic Engineering Division, and I am the program coordinator for the Richmond Highway BRT project. So the team asked me to come and give you an update kind of where we are with BRT and what we've been working on. Next slide, Tim. Oops, thank you. So hopefully everyone knows this isn't a surprise here. The project you can see to the right is to not only plan, design, but to implement, right, a BRT system in between Huntington Metro Station and Fort Belvoir. The red dots that we've kind of made a lot larger for everyone to see is where the potential or the 9 stations will be located. So in particular for you guys, you're most interested in the first one to the left at the top of the screen, which is the Huntington Metro. Because we do have 2 active projects that have to do with like road reconstruction, and section 2, you can see here that has like that light blue and black outline. That is the VDOT Corridor Improvements Project. And I did include a link there, so you can, if you want to know more specifically about that project, you can hyperlink or click there. Next slide. So I wanted to stop because, during the pandemic, we did have a lot of virtual public meetings, and I think it's worth noting the topic. So we started doing these in October. The first one was right-of-way acquisition. And then we went to station design in November. In December, we brought everybody back to the table, and we did what we call just a quarter update. So at that time, we're not only continuing right with the BRT project, but obviously also the VDOT Corridor Improvements Project. And they had just finished up the urban design guidelines that were led by the Department of Planning and Development. And you just heard a little bit about active Fairfax. So a lot of going on in the quarter. We wanted to bring it back. And that was the December meeting. In January, we talked about branding for the system. And the most latest meeting was on June 30th, where we talked about the preliminary engineering and the changes to date that we've been able to modify given, community comments that we've gotten, or just, refining the design. All of these meetings are on our website. They have been recorded. They're available for viewing. And I've given you the link to the project website at the bottom. And I think if you tab to the left, you should be able to find all the information. Next slide, Tim. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the project process. We are approximately about 30% design. Like we mentioned on our website, we have the updated roll plans. You can see to the first graphic to the right, kind of what that looks like. Another feature that we've been able to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, is our interactive map that shows the same information. In regards to our environmental study, or also known as our NEPA document, we are expecting a final signature later this summer in the August-September timeframe. And as always, as we continue to the design, we will continue to refine, whether that be reductions to property impacts, specifically to right-of-way. And you can see something else that we're heavily focused on is our enhancing our stormwater management design. And here is a graphic at the bottom right that kind of shows, throughout the quarter, we're not only, we have to manage stormwater, but if in doing so, let's try to make these amenities found along the corridor. Next slide, please. So quickly about our BRT schedule, nothing has changed. Right now, we are still anticipating a delivery date of 2030. Yes, that has changed from the original schedule, but lots of factors along the way have contributed to that delay. So whether that be, we're continuing to look at the design, our environmental process, or more closely the VDOT project that, again, we can't finish the BRT project until they've done their road work, are some of these things that have led to this new schedule. Obviously, we need to finish right-of-way acquisition before we can actually start the roadway construction. And I think we just like to highlight this, that one of the first active spots of when you'll actually see us kind of in the ground, right, active construction is when we relocate the utility lines. And that'll be in around 2023 is our expectation. Next slide.
And those are going to go underground, right?
So far, staff has not been told that. We know conversations are ongoing with, Supervisor Stork and Lusk and others. And so as soon as that happens, staff will change gears as soon as we're given the word to do so.
Why don't we ever hear that this is part of the planning, that you've got a design that you can implement it right away? We've never heard any discussion, despite the fact that your own comp plan has a long paragraph about undergrounding. We never hear about you guys making any plans to do it if they come up with the money.
Yeah, and
Is
while
there
you're
some
at it,
reason
you
for
guys
this?
you need to be crunching numbers, because this is wasteful spending. You take a pole down, it costs money. You move a pole and stick it back up, it costs money. If you take the delta between that, you can add it to doing this underground. Verizon has already said they'll do it for free if you give them the bank. So you guys need to start focusing on that and push your leadership to look at the same thing, please, because that's what the citizens want. We have to live here. Thank you very much.
Understood. We'll take those comments back. So just quickly, we want to talk about our new website interactive map. We've actually done a similar thing as what VDOT did. So this works, you can see an example of it to the right. It works like a search engine. If you put in an address or hopefully a location, it should populate and take you specifically to the area of interest. I guess one warning or minor stipulation is when you're south of, let's see, Sherwood Hall Lane, so Sherwood Hall Lane to Jeff Todd Way, since that is the VDOT Corridor Improvements Project, we don't have those details. We're not in charge of that design. So though it will still take you there, but we'll link you back to their map so you will always get the freshest and the most updated information. I've also connected you to that link specifically here at the bottom. And again, if you don't want to use this interactive and you want the static maps, those are also available on our website. Next slide. So I just wanted to highlight this because we're going to do some more work here. Concept 1 for the station design is moving forward, so you can see what that looks like to the right. So this, if you are following the project, we did a survey. I think it was out in, back in November timeframe. We brought that all back to our executive committee, and through just overall the voting process, and what we found, station 1 or concept 1 is the one that's been chosen. So again, this is just a conceptual design. It's not a final design. We still have a lot of more work to do. Through the survey and community input, we've heard other features that we want to make sure we implement. So whether that be security, what the fare collection devices, branding, we're looking at signage and wayfinding. But I think the bigger and more interesting thing for the community is what we're calling the community charm. So, this is a static or not very interesting station when you look at it individually. And we know there's 9 different station areas, and we want to highlight their history, their just what they're known for, I guess you can say. So we're looking to incorporate those characteristics. And so in the fall, what we'll do is start reaching back out. So, like what we heard when we did our survey was Huntington and PennDOT kind of are the gateway for Richmond Highway for the area. whether it be Gum Springs, all the Gum Springs history, Lockheed Boulevard, some of the, you're really close to Huntley Meadows or the airfield. So those are the type of things that we will be coming back out, having those conversations, asking the community what they want us to highlight and incorporating them into the station. So in various ways, whether it's a railing, whether it's etching in the windscreen in the back or a type of sculpture. Next slide, Tim.
I think you guys are doing a great job here, and I have one quick question. And I know this is just a schematic design. We have a homeless population that is a little bit problematic down in this area. And when I look at your benches, and I know people need places to be, and I'm very sympathetic to that. But when you leave them full out, people have a tendency to camp out, and go to sleep. So are you gonna put little dividers and stuff like that? So.
Yes, absolutely. So your 30% concept. So exactly, making sure we can maintain these, right? Making sure we're not creating an issue. Making sure obviously we have off station corner amenities. So while we are looking at bringing bikes on the bus, well, we don't have places to put bikes within the station. So if you wanted to leave your bike park there, we don't want you to put it on one of these pillars. We will have bike racks on the corner. So yep, looking at the station area as a whole and how all these components kind of play into each other. Next slide, Tim. Thank you. So next steps for the project. Continue to refine the design. So some of the areas that we'll be studying further are so the roadway and intersection refinements. We'll continue to look at stormwater management and drainage. And obviously, a big component for us is the pedestrian and bicycle design. We were also hearing a lot of concerns. Obviously, we have the same for property impacts. So we're looking to go back and minimize those where possible. And we talked a little bit about this already, but hold those community conversations on the petition station area. So the community charm, we want to, again, reflect those in the station. And in September, when we think it's all safer to do so, we want to start having, in the ground meetings on the corridor, going out to people, and then just, again, having those conversations. And thank you. So last one here is just how to stay involved. We have various ways. I guess one of the better ways is to sign up for Fairfax alerts. If you put in the category Richmond Highway BRT, we'll send you specific updates anytime we have project meetings. Another one is join our BRT mailing list. You can, and I'm sorry I didn't put it on here, but we do have an email, dotbrt@fairfaxcounty.gov, and you can email us that way, ask us to go on the list. Or if you go to our home webpage, if you scroll towards the bottom, you'll also find where you can sign up. And if not, there's always you go to our county website and you just put in Richmond Highway BRT, and you should be able to find us, at least our homepage, where we have lots of resources, lots of material and information on background on meetings that we've had, or just, past designs that we've done. All that information is on our website. And I think that was my last slide, right, Tim?
Yep, that was it.
Great. So I think now, do you guys want me to take questions or additional questions?
Yeah, if there are any more questions for Vanessa, otherwise we can move on to the final presentation.
Excellent.
And seeing none.
Hi, this is Polly Doherty. Tim, I had a quick question.
Okay.
Vanessa, we really appreciate all that you're doing on this BRT project. I was wondering, I know there was some concern with the design. At some points it becomes really wide, that there's a lot of lanes that are added to the highway. Was there any traffic analysis that was done to inform that design?
So we're a transit project, right? So when we looked at these, we looked at just adding the transitway. If you actually look at our design and I'm just talking about section 1, we're not adding any additional lines that aren't already existing. Now, with that said, we've heard your concerns, and we think there's certain areas that we can go back and look at to see if we can remove right turn lanes. And let me give you an example of that. Specifically, I think it's around the Hybla Valley area, maybe to the north. And I can't remember the shopping center. There is, for one block, there is a right turn lane. So it's it was already existing, and then I want to say when development came in or the shopping center came in. So we're looking at that type of thing. If we can go back and refine things to kind of get rid of these, a right turn lane on a block long, if there's any way we can reduce that or eliminate that, we will. So I can't give you an answer, a concrete answer that we will be able to do that, but that is something that we'll be looking at in our next phase of design.
Vanessa, I'm sorry, I'm terribly confused. I don't think we have 13 lanes in many areas already. I don't think we have 12 lanes already. Yet the VDOT plan is adding, as Holly indicated, but she's just nicer at it than I am. 13 lanes in 2 locations. 13 lanes in 2 locations. I think it's 3 or 4, 12 lanes and 11 lanes. And then on the cross streets, and again, it's not you guys inside FCDOT, it's VDOT, but you're tagging into it because you're doing the Metro piece or the BRT piece of it. Side streets in neighborhoods, and specifically in the Gum Springs neighborhood, 5 lanes where you're going to be turning like crazy, and it's not a hard right-hand turn. People use and that's a 12 lane across at the Gum Springs area at Sherwood Hall Lane. Folks in that neighborhood walk across that roadway to get to their shops or their work or the bus or whatever the case may be. You guys are creating a death trap. Absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable.
Well, Catherine, it's actually 13 lanes.
You're right, Queenie. You're right.
Yeah, it's 13 lanes, and it's fragmenting the Gum Springs community. So what is happening is that this project, VDOT, FCDOT, ... is actually segregating the Gum Springs community, because we already got that god-awful pedestrian underpass that's going to separate the community. Now you're putting 13 lanes. How are we supposed to be able to cross those 13 lanes? In order for Gum Springs to have been able to even cross that Ladson lane in front of the Spring Garden Apartments with the 7-Eleven, because VDOT refused to put a traffic signal there, was that Jube Shiver, God bless his soul, he's resting in peace now, is that he put a coffin, a casket across Richmond Highway, which forced VDOT to put a light there. Now it's going to be worse. And on top of that, if this is supposed to be active transportation, active Fairfax or whatever, the other piece of the impact for those 13 lanes is that you're going to be wiping out the first row of the low-income housing at Spring Garden Apartments. Where are those folks going? And when the county keeps talking about affordable housing, what are you going to do? You can't have affordable housing if you're wiping out a whole row. And then to add injury to insult, the county wants to do a trade-off of putting another senior housing project right there at Richmond Highway and Sherwood Hall Lane. And how do you think those old folks going to cross Richmond Highway? They ain't even going to make it across the first lane.
And this is
Understood.
Gretchen. Oh, sorry. And this is Gretchen from Planning and Zoning from Mount Vernon Council. We had this discussion at our last meeting too, is that no one's going to cross 5 or 6 lanes to get to the bus. They're just not going to do it. It's dangerous. So there needs to be a cut in how many lanes the folks are putting forward, because this is not going to work.
Well, Gretchen, here's another concern that Gum Springs has with this 13 lanes at Sherwood Hall Lane. And this is for FCDOT and VDOT. And that is, okay, VDOT determined that they needed to have a dedicated right turn lane between Napa Road and Boswell. And that was put in. Now that's going to come out. But now The concern is, and everybody in Mount Vernon is aware of this, and that is there is a potential for Sherwood Hall Lane to go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes from Richmond Highway and Sherwood Hall Lane. And so it's almost like VDOT and FCDOT is going to sneak in those 2 lanes because they're going to say that the traffic volume is so heavy that it requires this. But these are a lot of self-inflicted wounds that VDOT and FCDOT is putting on such a small community as Gum Springs. We can't take the brunt of everybody's problems for transportation. And then the last thing I'll say is that those of us who grew up here in Gum Springs, like I said, for us to get that traffic light at Ladson Lane was for Jude Shiver to put a coffin in the middle of the street, is that now we're struggling to even cross Fordson Road. And I don't know what else you expect us to do when this is not transportation friendly, and the fact that for us to take action, it's always drastic. And beforehand, we had to fight. Now, a lot of people that are here on this call from VDOT and FCDOT, they have no clue what I'm saying next. And that is because they have no history about this Richmond Highway corridor, which back in 1965, we called Richmond Highway a death trap. And then VDOT decided to exclude Gum Springs. And you know what the proposal then was? To build an overpass over the entire community. Now you're doing it blatantly by segregating us because we're going to be so fragmented that we can't go anywhere. We can't do anything. So all of these roadway, quote, improvements that are being done are for people who do not even live in the area, don't shop in the area, they're passing through. Because when you come out on what?
I apologize. I know that we have a lot of other folks that are on, and I just wanted to bring it back. I think we all hear the concern. I know that we have a lot of folks on the call that are working on.
Well, what's my concern then, Graham? What's my concern? Since you cut me off, what's my concern?
The Richmond way.
Read it back to me so I understand that you understand what my concerns are, because you're not in my head and you don't live here. So what are my concerns? Just give me a summary of what my concerns are.
Queenie, what I just wanted to mention is that this meeting is for the Huntington Plan Amendment. And so I think that we absolutely hear the concern. We absolutely do. But this is getting to the point where we're far beyond what we came here to talk about, which is the Huntington Plan Amendment and the existing conditions.
Yeah,
So,
but Graham, Vanessa brought up Gum Springs and the BRT. So we can't talk about a side conversation. Okay, fine, move on. Because you still can't tell me what my concerns are.
Excuse
Go
me.
ahead, move
Hey,
on.
Queenie, it's
I'm
Tim.
good. That's
Could we-
okay, I'm good.
We're gonna
Okay,
come.
if I can get everybody just hold off for a second here. I think what you've identified is the need for some additional discussion on some very specific areas that we're looking at. Now, to Graham's point, this may be a far enough away area from Huntington, but obviously it feeds into what we're looking at in terms of transportation. We can certainly clarify that along the way, and if our staff members are okay with it, we can probably schedule and identify some time to address those. Would that be possible, Graham?
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's just a question of what we came here to discuss, but this is an ongoing.
No, I
issue.
got it. And I got
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
But I think Queenie has enough very sincere concerns that may not relate directly to where we are in terms of the Huntington process. But obviously the community is concerned enough that we want to make sure that's not left on the table. So we'll work with you. Excuse me, guys, let me finish. We'll work with staff. Walter and I will work with staff to schedule some time specific to that discussion and that focus on that area. Does that sound all right?
We love
Queenie?
that. However,
Of course.
yeah. However, the point is that this entire process, the BRT, which goes to the Huntington Metro, and the widening of the road, as Queenie has pointed out, exacerbates and creates what the latest EDA study, market study on Richmond Highway calls a car sewer. If you build more roadways, they are going to come. What the intention of an urban environment is to be people-centric, not auto-centric. And that started out with the first conversation we had where the guys say, we're going to do this 2045 study. We're going to look at density and know how many more cars we're going to have. So we're all in with Queenie all the way up this road. And as most of you may know by now, a very formal letter has been sent to everybody in the world, and it is being addressed at the highest of levels because we don't agree with any of this, frankly. And I applaud you, Queenie. Thank you for speaking up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
Tim,
why
this
don't-
is Mary Payton. I'd like to also point out that the South County Task Force is against roads so wide, and the speed limit should be lower, the lanes should be narrower. We are totally against the wideness and the speed of the VDOT plan for Route 1. And I think there should be some more discussion to consider community input on this.
Okay, why don't, I tell you what, after tonight's meeting, Walter and I can schedule a conference call with staff to kind of go over next steps, all right? So we can address your concerns and also address the issues related to Huntington Metro area. So we'll work with them to figure out how we can best do this and have this specific discussion related to where we're going.
Tim, this is Gretchen. I got one more comment. The discussion goes nowhere unless you bring unless you bring VDOT into the conversation, because they're the ones running this train and they seem to be running over everybody.
Okay, well, what point taken, Gretchen, we'll talk to them about that we'll coordinate with staff and see what we can do to get that addressed.
Thank you.
Okay, Graham, do we have more slides to go through?
We do, if you like them. We do have a presentation from the Teague team. And so Carter, if either of you have the ability to share your screen on your particular slide, wanted to talk about parking study in particular.
Hi, this is Neil Teague. I have, if Aaron gives me the ability to share, I have something to share. I'm waiting for the light to go on the share content screen, or else if somebody has, you have the slide, somebody puts them up. Okay, here I see it. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see this screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you, Graham. Again, I'm Neil Teague with Stout and Teague Company. Stout and Teague is here tonight as a consultant representing and joint developer with Metro. We have entered into an agreement with them to assemble a team to help Metro prepare a master plan for the future of the Huntington Metro station. With me is Carter Clark and Harriet Anaz of Stout and Teague. David Samba, you've already heard from. Mark Vianney and Tim Dugan of Bean Kinney were on the line. I think they may be having to go to.
Still here.
Oh, you're still here. Okay, to another meeting.
Briefly.
The purpose of the discussion tonight is simply to give you an overview of the station and the station area as it functions as a metro station. So we were the nominator for the plan amendment. So WMATA's goal in this process, if it's approved through the county review, is to add additional density and uses to the station itself. But that said, it is a metro station, and we want to continue to maintain and enhance its function as that. So tonight, I just want to give you kind of an overview of the station and how it functions in the metro system. Again, you'll see here, the bright area is the quarter-mile circle, the walking circle. That's the kind of the golden circle for pedestrian activity around the station area. You'll see the site outlined in red that we're working with is about 29 acres that comprises the station. Tim did a great job of kind of talking about the station and the area, so I won't spend as much time on that. But I'm sorry, I got to get good. I was obscuring my own screen. So Huntington Station, it's already been mentioned. It's the terminus for the yellow line. If you look at the terminal stations, there, as you can see, there are 9 of them here. Some of them because they have shared terminus, even though there's more than 9 lines. And Huntington is one of the busier ones as a terminal station. 2 in Fairfax County are busier, and Shady Grove is the busiest of all. But Huntington has, in 2018, and I'll come back to why we're doing 2018, had about 6,800 trips during the typical business day, about just under 1,900 during the weekend. It's busier than Franconia and a number of other stations. On the other hand, if you look at any terminal station in relation to some of the busiest stations, Huntington, doesn't begin to be as busy as some of those terminal stations more in the center of the system. Sorry, my apologies. There we go. For some reason it wasn't working. The station serves Alexandria, National Airport, National Landing, Crystal City, Pentagon, and of course, DC. It serves, it was the first station in Fairfax County. The first station opened outside the Beltway in 1983. And through transferring to the Blue Line and other lines up the system, it serves Fairfax County locations as well as Arlington and of course into the district. Like Tim already mentioned, we've got 2 full mezzanines on Huntington Avenue and on North Kings, both with bus loops, kiss and rides, etc. Ridership is down about 25% over the last 6 years. We are excluding 2019. We're using 2018 because 2019, you may recall, the station was fully closed for over 3 months during the summer for track and station work, and of course in 2020 because of COVID. But the ridership at Huntington Station has declined by considerably more than the entire system average over that period. The destinations are typical downtown locations, with obviously the Pentagon being one of the largest. WMATA does periodic ridership surveys, and the most recent one we have for this station was in 2016. And at that time, you can see that the station had already pretty good distribution of modes, about 900 kiss and ride, 11% kiss and ride, almost a quarter walked or biked to the station, another almost quarter used bus, and then 45% was park and ride. And the dots, I know this may be hard to see, but the blue dots obviously represent walkers, bikers, and you can see the distribution of park and ride and bus riders. And it really extends, as you can imagine, the Richmond Highway corridor over to as far as Telegraph to the west, where it starts to become just as convenient to go to Franconia Springfield. Along with the decline in ridership, the park and ride utilization has also dropped during this period of time in a similar proportion, 28% versus 12%. Some of the reasons for that, the system-wide decline was due to a number of regional changes, including concerns about Metro's timeliness and safety that they've been addressing. But the other thing is the BRAC project, which has been going, for 15 years, has started to move jobs that were to the north of the station down to Fort Belvoir and other locations to the south. And that maybe also contributed to this. In 2018, the original south garage, a 900-car garage, was closed due to structural concerns. It's still closed and is not expected to reopen. The north and middle garages are open. Their capacity is about 2,700 parking spaces. And the average utilization, however, in 2019 was 1,800 spaces. So we still have a fair amount of capacity, even with that garage closed, to accommodate single car or carpool parking riders. Just talking about future trends, again, I'm sure you're aware, Virginia Tech and Amazon HQ2 are starting to really take hold further in the yellow line corridor to the north, while Amazon HQ2 is filling in a lot of buildings that that already existed. So in that sense, isn't necessarily increasing density to that location. It still kind of solidifies this corridor as a jumping off point for that activity to the north, as well as the traditional drivers of Pentagon, National Airport, and of course into DC. To the south, again, and Vanessa mentioned this earlier, the VRT project, really driven by the Embark Richmond Highway project, is potentially adding 6.5 million square feet of additional development clustered around the BRT nodes, all feeding into this station. And so in our view, this really makes this station a hinge point, both north and south, for for multiple modes of transportation to serve the region. The current, again, 2016, I'm using it with 7,300 riders per day. Looking at BRT projections, walk bike projections, we're expecting that to grow considerably to almost double in 2040 as BRT really starts to add a lot of capacity to bring people to the station without using their cars. We are doing a study of the future commuter parking demand to working with Fairfax County FCDOT to look at the daily utilization. You saw that slide, so we've already started that part to identify the park shed where the majority of parking patrons are coming, then to establish a utilization rate and to project parking demand for the future. That study is going to be presented to you folks at a future meeting after county staff's reviewed it, as we're trying to make sure that we have the right balance of parking for automobile commuters coupled with the other modes of transit that we want to serve this station. And that kind of concludes our transportation overview. Are there questions or comments?
I just have one question, Neil. Where is the demolition of the defunct parking garage? When is that going to take place? We keep hearing different dates for it.
Well, there is no date set. It's really being we're trying to tie it to the approval of a new plan, so that rather than simply leaving a hole, it will be part of a continuous process to really incorporate whatever is needed in a new station master plan that would be after obviously conclusion of this plan amendment and what I'll call the traditional zoning and site plan reviews that would be associated with that. There was talk, you're right, Lynn, there was talk about it being demolished some years ago, but I think that was just simply premature, recognizing that while it's not exactly pretty, there's really no reason to take that step until we have something to replace it.
Okay, got it. Thanks a lot.
Neil, this is Holly Doherty. Hey, thank you for that really interesting presentation. I was just wondering, your analysis didn't look at all at extension of the yellow line, did it? Or a need to extend that line further?
It does not. I've been aware that there is a very long range plan to consider that. And of course, it was mentioned earlier this evening. We have not been asked to consider that within the planning horizon that we are working with. If that were to change, obviously it would be a material factor because, let's face it, parking at terminal stations is there partially because they're terminal stations. But my understanding and discussions, and I see Bob Pecora and others, that's not within the planning horizon that we're working with.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Teague, this is Tim Sargent. I'm curious, long-range vision, I know you've still got a lot of data to research and absorb before, to your point, a final vision is created. Any ideas? Some of our conversations we've had preliminarily within this task force setting have included the surrounding areas and what does and doesn't work for attracting people and new dwellers for this area. Any thoughts from your team regarding the surrounding area as well as Metro in terms of how that might fit into what you're looking at? I know it's very broad, but I think right now it's okay to be broad.
Yeah, we've been more focusing on, a couple things. We feel it's very important to make the interface between BRT and the Metro as easy and direct as possible, as well as the local bus. If you're looking at mode shift, you want to make sure that is very easy. One of the things that Vanessa didn't mention, and I don't know if she's still on the line, is the frequency of bus service that BRT entails is pretty frequent. And as a result, you got people coming and going quickly, and the whole idea is that you hop on the bus, get on the Metro, and you don't have that sense of, I better figure out plan my life around the bus schedule because if I miss this one, it's 20 minutes from now. I think their planned headways, as they call them, are 6 minutes. And if I'm incorrect, somebody please correct me. But so we view that easy access in, we would like to try to create some kind of central and public activity center that would help, focus not only the Metro station, but some of the communities surrounding, looking at this as a place which they're, easy access and a place that they want to come to. We haven't focused as much to try to answer your question on what should be happening around it, because that really wasn't the focus of our nomination, and we didn't really think of it as within our purview to even say. But we certainly think just making the area walkable, there's a lot, as I know Joanne Phoebe, presented in the last meeting, there's a lot of very significant physical constraints, elevation, road disconnection, and so on. That's probably not something that we're going to solve in a complete way, but if we focus on making the existing connection stronger, making the street crossing stronger, making the internal connection stronger, that's what we think is important. And then the surrounding areas are already, making some strong steps. Huntington Club is working on a plan that would really substantially make that a walkable community. This task force recently approved a plan amendment that would bring some more residential density with a small public plaza across Huntington Avenue, right from the entrance to the station. All those are things we look at as creating a network here. Even though this is a big site, a lot of it is taken up with transit functions, will be taken up with transit functions. So it's not just going to happen here.
You know, you raise a good point in terms of measurement for what we're looking at in a vision, and that's the connectivity between Metro and the BRT. And to your point, having trains there, you know, having the BRT there as quickly as possible to keep people moving and feel like they don't have to wait and they're not stuck there waiting for the next train or bus or whatever. That's a very valid point that we can look at. And even if we can't put it in a quantitative way, something we can put in visionary expectations in terms of a plan language. So something to look at. I appreciate that. Thanks. Other questions?
I have one question. This is Mary. Curious as to how the elevation difference between the Kings and Huntington can be addressed for pedestrians. Right now, you really have to go through the metro station and take the escalators to get from one elevation to the other. And I'd be interested how the developer, you know, what techniques or possibilities there might be other than escalators to address that.
That's something that I heard in Joanne's presentation. You know, we can't fight basic elevations. It's 130 feet in a certain distance. I think as you start to look at options to create pathways, they're either very steep or they're very, very lengthy switchbacks. So my view is that there's going to be some combination that's going to have some level of mechanical intervention, shall we say, if you're going to have an effective pathway through there. You're correct. You can indeed, and people who know about it know that you can just walk through the metro station and you know, not get charged, and that is an effective pathway between upper and lower. But beyond that, it's going to take some similar kinds of combination of you know, roadways, steps, and probably some kind of mechanical intervention. Every time we look at it, you know, the switchbacks get so big that first of all, we don't have room, and secondly, people just won't find them very convenient.
Other questions, comments?
So hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Teague.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
So Graham, where are we now?
All right, so if there are no further questions, the next meeting is going to be in September. So we're going to be, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to have the August recess. And so we'll be doing a lot of work in setting up the other SSPA that the group is going to be reviewing, which is the Mount Vernon Highway SNA study, or Suburban Neighborhood Area Study. So there's going to be more on that in the fall. And so that'll be one of the ones that we'll be starting to take a look at in September at the next meeting, which, as I mentioned, will be in person. There will be some virtual participation that's allowed as a part of that, but there will be, as far as we understand, a need for a quorum to assemble in person. So we'll provide a lot of details on kind of how that's going to work and, you know, what it entails as soon as we can. But just look for that on September the 7th, excuse me. I think I said the 6th, but it will be September the 7th.
So Grant, but before we move on, are there any public comments? Do we have anyone on the line? No.
There are no public callers. I believe Christine Morin is, whoop, I guess she's not anymore. Okay. So no, there are no public callers.
Okay. And it's 8:10. Wow. I mean, this was a lot to cover, a lot of discussion. And
Walter,
again, for the good of the group, any more questions or comments?
Walter, this is Ellen, and Catherine put this in the chat. But in fact, I know you guys are going to to staff about having a meeting where we can talk about the whole road widening and 13 lanes. But as a matter of fact, it's coming before the Board of Supervisors the end of this month on the 27th.
Right, next week. Yeah.
So we do not. We can talk about it, but if they move it forward, then what are we going to talk about other than yell at them?
Right. That is true, Ellen. And so that I don't have an answer for you.
Well, let me share this. I have been, as you guys know, and this is for everybody who's involved, and thank you to Mary and everybody. Supervisor Stork is working on getting a bunch of people together along with Supervisor Lusk. But on the 27th, the BRT plan is going to go before, as Ellen said, the Board of Supervisors to get their blessing. Once that blessing happens, Katie bar the door. We will never get any change in our community. We will be stuck with what VDOT is working on and the expansive roadway network that they think is the right thing to do. I am sending a text right as we speak to Supervisor Stork, because he's been communicating with me while he's on vacation, requesting that he ask for this to be delayed. Now, everybody's going to go, oh my God, we've been doing this for years. It'll cost more money. Well, all this stuff is just on paper. So it can be delayed. You've got to get it right. And I want all these transportation people on here, when you run back to Mr. Bashadney, you need to tell him this is our area. This needs to be done right. It is not a traffic engineer's purview to tell us how we should live. So we would like this thing delayed. I'm going to do that in my note to Stork. Hopefully he will tell the board he'd like the decision to be delayed. And the rest of you who have spoken up tonight, I hope you will do the same thing to your supervisors. Thank you.
I would do the same, Catherine. I'll back you up. This is Queenie. I'll back you up.
This is Gretchen. I'll also back you up.
Oh, that's better.
Okay, guys, well, you need to send emails in.
Yeah, my
Not a problem.
We're sending one in on Friday. So it'll be similar to what has been sent already.
We can send one.
Okay. Very, very good. Thank you all. Thank you, Catherine. So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Gretchen.
Is there a second?
Second, Lynn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carry forward, and thank you all for a healthy conversation. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and I'll be seeing many of you very soon, I'm sure.
Hey, Tim, I forwarded you the letter, the 3-page letter from the Mount Vernon Council. I'm sorry you weren't on the original letter. We did send it to Walter though, but I've just sent it to you at your Fairfax County address so you can see what the issues are.
Okay, thanks.
And we actually have a detailed road by road, intersection by intersection set of recommendations, which we haven't attached to that. We want to do that in person with people because we don't want them to start giving excuses ahead of time.
For my conversation with many people here, SFDC will be weighing in on this issue too.
Yep.
Yay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Fantastic.
Walter. Thank you, Tim.
All right, well, thank you guys.
Thank you both.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Good night. Have a good night.
Good night. Okay.